So I'm interested in this big fear of the tyranny of the majority, and philosopher, so maybe can give a little comment on that. But I feel like
I give no little comments apparently.
No little comments, big comment.
Well, long
the
comments.
Tyranny of the majority requires big comments, I think. But basically, we have the internet, and there's all these very small sources of information as well as very big sources of information. There are people we know, people we don't know, all of these different things. But one thing that seems to be certain is that majority opinion rules on the internet more than anything, because while we all disagree, when we all agree on something, when something arises, one of those hash Twitter feeds or anything where you suddenly get 1 million people to like it, then that is a new way of generating majority opinion. But the way of generating that majority opinion may be based on a variety of different factors rather than just one news story, one major event, one big comment by the president, but from an array of different things. How do we make sure that the majority is right and the majority is still respecting minority opinion and keeping those people in mind as well?
So when I say no small answers, what I mean is only long answers, but I'll try to be brief because I don't know. First of all, I actually don't agree with your premise. So, 1 million, Ashton Kutcher has 3 million followers. So what? That's a tiny, tiny minority of people who use Twitter, much less people on the net or in the world. It's hardly a majority. The things that sweep through that look like majority opinion are actually more tribal than they look. They look like everybody is now talking about or listening to or whatever, but that's because everybody you know, it's the nature of these phenomena, right? If everybody that you know or that I know is engaging with them. It's far, far, far from majority. Majority opinion is what happens when you have a culture that has so few sources of information and ideas that everybody's watching the same channels. And then you get a really pernicious sort of majority opinion, where everybody thinks that or assumes that the role of a housewife is to, because that's what Laura Petrie on the Dick Van Dyke Show is doing, or whatever. That's majority opinion. It seems to me you're pointing to a different phenomenon, which isn't really majority, but is a sort of social herding that looks like it looks quite thoughtless and frequently is. If it's around some viral video or whatever, then it's sort of funny or whatever. These fashions do sweep through, but it's so fragmented. Many people also complain that the internet is fragmenting the culture. It used to be we all watched Walter Cronkite, or if not him, then one of the other 2 people giving us the news. 3 stations, and now it's fragmented all over the place because there isn't this sort of. In many ways, I think it's a good thing that we don't have that sort of majoritarian culture anymore. But the other thing you point to, I think, is terrible danger. It's what I was referring to just in the previous endless answer, which is that we seem, as humans, to prefer to hang out with people who are like us and often usually resist ideas that seem too foreign. And as a result, we, at its worst, we engage in groupthink or sort of cultural myopia that has us, well, again, at its worst, invading and killing other people because we don't understand what they're doing, don't understand them. We devalue them. And there is some evidence, there is evidence that groups who hang out only with people like themselves become more committed to their beliefs and adopt the furthest edge of those beliefs. And if that's what's happening routinely on the internet, then it's forming us into tribes that are more insular and more extreme, and that's not exactly what most of us want. It's not what I want. It's not at all clear to me that there's evidence that this is a serious danger on the net. There is evidence that humans in general will do this. And you certainly can find what are called echo chambers of people who do that. Seems to me, and this is in part, well, actually touches on the Dean stuff a little bit, but it seems to me in part that often what look like echo chambers to people outside of it are, I'll give you an example. If it's a bunch of Dean supporters in 2004 on the Howard Dean site who are commenting on a blog post about the wonderful thing that Howard Dean did or whatever, and you have 400 people in an hour, which is pretty typical, who are primarily saying, yay, yay, go Howard. That looks like an echo chamber, and maybe it is, but it's also how you form political movements. You get people together who agree with one another and who egg each other on and reinforce, and they say, oh yeah, no, that really bothers me too. I hate the pre-existing condition thing. We're going to do something about that. Mm-hmm. That's echo chamber. It's also politics, and it's something that we want. So some echo chambers are actually positive, and some of them are, all conversations begin with agreement. So if I don't know you, we will engage in some small talk. We'll find ourselves next to each other. And we'll sound each other out to find some area where we agree enough that we can begin to talk. And, you know, whether it's movies or politics, maybe, or whatever. Conversation always begins from a point of agreement and then sort of iterates carefully on the differences. That's how we talk. And so so on the one hand, you have this notion that people who only agree, talk with one another, it is always bad. And on the other hand, because you have in mind a model of conversation that says the only worthwhile conversation is when a Nazi and a Jew sit down and they talk in a calm and reasonable way about their fundamental assumptions and presuppositions and come to an agreement, because that's what rational people do. Nobody ever does that. That's not how conversation works. Conversation serves lots of purposes, only one of which is intellectual advancement. Mm-hmm. It primarily serves a social function, where we get to like one another, and it's fun, it's interesting. So the notion that all conversation has to be fundamental is flawed, and the model that argues against the internet because it's not doing enough of that is also flawed. Nevertheless, there's a real danger.